Did you know that in an average human lifetime you will ingest up to 70 different insects and up to 10 spiders? Hi, my name is James Starr. Today I'm going to be doing my informative speech. I'll be informing you on how to play fantasy football. I'm going to start out by telling you a few fun facts about it. In 1962, fantasy football was actually created by Wilfred Winkenbach. He created the first league. It was called the Greater Oakland Professional Pigskin Procrastinators League. He started with a few of his buddies in the Oakland Raiders organization and a few season ticket holders from the Oakland Raiders. To check their scores, they would actually have to comb through the newspapers on Wednesdays to pick out the stats and everything, and they have to take the stats out and then break them down in order to make up the point scoring. It would actually take that long for the stats to post to the newspaper from the Sunday and Monday games on the West Coast. So that was back then, but now there are over 27 million people playing fantasy football in the U.S. and Canada. Fantasy football adds about $2.97 billion a year to the U.S. economy. You can play fantasy football on a plethora of websites. So you might be wondering, how does fantasy football relate to me and why do I need to know anything about it? Well, of the 27 million people who are playing fantasy football, I'm sure some of us know a few. And I'm actually pretty sure that there's probably a few people in this class who are playing fantasy football. And for the ladies in the class, 20% of the people playing fantasy football in the U.S. and Canada are females. So it's not just the guys who are obsessed with football and fantasy football. There's some ladies out there that are just as obsessed with it as we are. So when you flip on your TV, you might see fantasy football shows such as The League on FXX. It's a fantasy football show. It's pretty popular, actually. It's about a few guys who started a fantasy football league, and they get into all kinds of crazy fun and have all kinds of crazy antics and stuff like that. On DirecTV, NFL Sunday Ticket, new this year, is actually a fantasy channel. It's just a whole channel that's nothing about fantasy football. I mean, it's nothing but fantasy football. You could be watching all the games on NFL Sunday Ticket, and if you're wondering how your certain player's doing, you just flip over to the channel. It'll tell you their stats. It has live look-ins whenever there's a touchdown and stuff like that. It's pretty crazy. If you watch ESPN on Sunday mornings, they always have fantasy football updates to tell you, who's hot, who's not, who's injured, who's starting, and all that good stuff. So those are a few fun facts about fantasy football and how it relates to you. Now I'm going to tell you the most important part about fantasy football, which is actually how to play fantasy football. Step one is going to be to join a league. So there are a bunch of different websites that you can use to play fantasy football. My favorite is ESPN.com. There's apps on your phone that you can download for each respective website. There's YahooSports.com, there's ABCSports.com, NBCSports.com. Those all have free leagues and are really user-friendly. If you're really into gambling, there's FanDuel.com. They say you can win a lot of money on there. I don't know. I haven't taken part in it yet. For my visual aid, I actually have my iPad here, which has an ESPN Fantasy Football app, as you can see right here. And it brings it up. And here's all my fantasy football teams. So you just click on the app and it takes you straight to fantasy football awesomeness. So once you found the website that you're going to use, you're going to need to figure out what type of league you're going to play in. I would definitely recommend playing in a standard fantasy football scoring league. It keeps things real simple. It's very user-friendly, good for beginners. I would definitely stick with an 8 to 10 player league. Once you get over that amount, there's a lot more players that are drafted, and it's a lot harder to get a good team. Maybe there'll be more players that you don't never heard of toward the end of the draft. So let's keep it simple. That'll take us straight into step 2, which is the draft. There's different types of drafts. They go from auction drafts, which is where you bid on a player. I'm not very good at that kind, so I don't really do that, to a snake draft. A snake draft is probably the easiest, most common form of drafting. Basically, you draft 1 through 10, and then instead of going 1 through 10 the next round, you would draft 10 through 1. And then it'll repeat that throughout the 16 rounds of the draft. Then after you found your draft type that you're going to do, you're going to need to go in there and you're going to need to rank your players. They already have them ranked 1 through 200 usually, but it behooves you to go in there and rank them the way that you see them. So that way if somebody drafts a player that you were wanting to get in front of you, you already know exactly who you can get next. You're going to need to draft a QB, 1 quarterback. You're going to need to draft 2 running backs, 2 wide receivers, one flex player, which is a wide receiver, running back, or a tight end. You need to draft one defense and one kicker, and that'll make your 9 starting fantasy football players for your lineup. And then there'll be 7 spots on your bench for a total of 16. Now for your bench, you're going to need to draft running backs, quarterback, wide receivers to fill that bench. So you have a lot of players that you can plug in case people get hurt. As far as defense and kicker goes, you can just pick those up on the waiver wire. I wouldn't worry too much about those right now. So those are the things you're going to need to make up a team. Now, I would recommend definitely drafting a QB or running back for your first pick because they'll be your biggest point getters, and those are the most popular players, obviously. So that'll take us straight into step 3, the season. Now, in a fantasy football season, it's about 12 to 13 games usually. You'll play each team once, but if you're playing in a 10-player league, it's a 13-game season. Obviously, you play a couple teams more than once. The playoffs will be the top 4 teams. They'll split you into 2, and you'll play each other for 1 week, and then the winner of that game will go into the championship, and so on and so forth. Now, during the season, you're going to make sure that you're checking your player status every week before the game, which means you need to go in there and see if they're injured, if they're hurt, suspended, anything like that. And then if they are, you're going to need to take that player out and put another player in so that you can get some points. Now, to check the health status beside their name, it'll have O if that player's out for the week. You definitely need to replace them with somebody else. A D if they're doubtful, which means there's a slim chance they're going to play, so you're probably going to need to sub them out for somebody else. A P means they're probable, which there's a good chance they'll play, but there's still a slight chance they couldn't, so you still need to be careful on that one. And if they're fully healthy, it'll just say healthy beside their name, and that guy's good to go. And also throughout the season, each player has 1 bye week, whenever their respective team's bye week is, so you need to be aware of that so you can sub that player out and get points for him and not lose all the points for that player for the week. So that is what you're going to need to do throughout the season to keep up with your fantasy team and do good. Now, another important part about fantasy football is the waiver wire. The waiver wire is where all the players who weren't drafted originally go to. So, I mean, if there's like 300 players drafted, all the rest of the players in the NFL are going to be on your waiver wire. The waiver wire is going to give you your best chance at upgrading your team if maybe they're not performing up to snuff the way you wanted them to. If you got a player who's hurt or something like that, you can drop him and replace him with somebody on the waiver wire who's maybe doing good. Now, the way the waiver wire works is Sunday, it closes down for all the games, and you can't pick anybody up after the games start until Wednesday again. So between Sunday and Tuesday, if there's any players on there that you want, you can submit a claim for them. We'll say 5 people submit a claim for 1 player. The player who has the worst record in the league will get first dibs on that player, so it kind of helps them out to try to even the odds. If you play the waiver wire right, you can make some big pickups that really change your season and give you a lot of momentum. So definitely pay attention to that and play it. So today I told you how to play fantasy football, and I told you a little bit about it. This has been my informative speech. I told you step 1, how to join a league, step 2, how to do the draft, step 3, how to play the season, and step 4, how to work the waiver wire. I'm James Starr, and thank you for watching my speech.